Abigail?
You good, Abigail? Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Fish and Wildlife Board meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 15th. And first thing we will do tonight is go around the room and introduce ourselves. We'll start with the board members, and then we'll move to the department staff that is with us tonight.
I'm Nick Burnham, Windsor County. Paul Noel, Orleans County.
Brian Bailey, Washington County.
Bob Patterson, Addison County.
Brad Ferlin, Caledonia County.
Martin Van Buren, Rutland County.
Jay Sweeney, Franklin County.
Michael Bancroft, Orange County.
Jamie Dragon, Lamoille County.
And online,
David Dean, Wyndham County.
Neil Hogan, Bennington County.
Michael Colson in Essex County.
okay, thank you. And Allison Frazier from Chittenden County won't be joining us tonight. She had a conflict. Okay, Commissioner, if you will take it from here for your staff.
Sure. I'm Commissioner Christopher Herrick, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and with me tonight, we have Abigail Connolly, but I also want to introduce our new General Counsel, Hannah Smith.
Hannah,
She's already been really helpful, keeping me out of trouble. And then John, why don't we'll just keep going down the line.
John Austin, Director of Wildlife.
David Sawsville, Program Manager in Wildlife Management. Eric Palmer, Director of Fisheries. Justin Stedman, Director of World. Sean Fowler, Major of Windsor.
And I see we have a few people online. It's like Nick Fortin, Judd Kratzer, John Hall,
And Martin.
and Margaret Murphy.
okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes of April 24th. If everybody's had a chance to read them.
So moved that we accept the previous minutes.
Okay, I have a motion to accept
Second.
and a second. Motion to accept and second. Any other comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye. Ayes have it. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comments. The public comment section is part of the meeting where we allow members of the public to up to 2 minutes to speak on whatever issue they would like. And it looks like we have some members from the public. I'm not sure if anybody is willing, wants to. Okay, we'll start here on the left and work around the room for anybody else that wants to. Whoever, okay. Yep.
Okay. Justin Lindholm from Mendon. I just want to put my 2 cents in about a thing I've been hearing about for the last few weeks about earn a buck for our next go around with the deer rules 2025 for the next 5 years. There's been talk about adding in 1 or 2 zones an earn a buck idea. I've had a lot of experience with deer hunters over the years, starting way back when we first started shooting does. There was a big ruckus over that, then a big ruckus over the antler point restrictions. Every time you come up with something really different, new, it stirs people up a lot. The hunters get really stirred up. And it actually doesn't make too much sense to do an earn a buck. Anyway, we only have a 1 buck limit in Vermont. So you can't tell somebody, a Vermont hunter, that you can't shoot a buck until you shoot a doe. And then adding 2 bucks has stirred people up anyway. So my 2 cents is that I think that's the board would be stepping into a bear trap if they got into that. It's really going to get hot. And that's my opinion on that. That's all I meant to say today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just speak from here, or we for me over
Right there's fine. It's up to you. It's up to you.
From the town of Orange, Vermont Wildlife Patrol. Wanted to read something that I've been researching the North American
model for wildlife conservation. I knew that we were going to be having a discussion, and I see that's it's going to be sometime between now and 2025. I look forward to that. But I found this in a technical review of the model of conservation that was done in 2012, and included Tom Becker from Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. I don't know if he's still with the department or not. But it was really, I'll just read it. It says, in a sense, and this is in regards to the markets for game and wildlife. It has since been held in principle that markets for game and non-game wildlife are not unacceptable because they privatize a common resource and lead to declines. I agree with that, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to also speak tonight and thank the commissioner and the warden service for the work that was done this legislative session on behalf of getting the prohibition of bear gallbladders. That's something I've spoken to here before. And I know that Bob Galvin worked on that too. He was hoping to be here to speak to that as well. But we really believe that this is one of those issues that modeled well how we can all work together moving forward. And along those same lines, I'm also grateful for the department's recommendations in relation to the panfish petition, and I wanted to support that as an angler and as a conservationist. I have no problems with outdoor recreation and fishing. I do a lot of it myself. But I do draw the line at selling what I catch, or I don't believe in supporting that. So I look forward to that discussion we're going to have, and also hearing what comes about with the petition. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Any public comments? Anybody else? No, seeing none. Anybody online? Public comments, Abigail, that you see? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda. That is the department's recommendation on a petition regarding commercial fishing, panfish, and crappie. That petition was, I think, presented to us 2 meetings ago. And we forwarded the petition to the department, and the department is coming back to us with a recommendation on how they wish to proceed, and their recommendation to us. So, Commissioner?
Thank you, Brad. Turn it over to Eric. Are you going to lead that discussion?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Eric Palmer. I'll go up on the camera here, but Director of the Fish Division. And our recommendation, we shared it as an email attachment with the board. Hopefully you've already seen that. I just brought paper copies. I'll pass around for anybody who doesn't have that handy. And our recommendation at this point is really pretty simple regarding the petition, is to table the petition. Not take up rulemaking at this time, not deny the petition, but table it until the department does our regular proposal to open up the fish regulations, which we do every other year. So that would be coming in January of 2025. And 2 reasons for that. One is that our panfish team, chaired by fish biologist Judd Kratzer, has already been working on commercial fishing and regulation for the panfish species listed in the petition. And the second is for efficiency. It's a pretty big process to open up the rules, do public hearings and so on. And so we'd just like to wait and do it all together in 2025, because we have other proposed changes for bait fish and for some of the lakes that have been under test water designations, like Berlin Pond and Stiles Pond, Deerfield River. And we just like to bring it all to the board together. We also are interested in having that conversation that Board Member David Dean requested on the North American model of fish and wildlife conservation. And we just like to do that at a future board meeting and have a good, robust discussion about that. So that's our recommendation in a nutshell regarding the petition. I'm happy to answer any questions, and Judge Kratzer is online as well.
A quick question. How long has the current rule been in effect relative to the sale of fish?
That's a good question. It's primarily a statute.
Or
that,
statute?
Yeah, there's a statute that designates what species cannot be sold commercially. And for a while, it wasn't entirely clear, because the board set seasons, they set bag limits,
Mhm.
lots of other stuff. And so there was sort of a question of, does the board have the authority to also regulate commercial fishing if there's a statute that regulates it? And just to solve any kind of questions, the statute was changed back about 7 years ago, clearly give the board authority to regulate commercial fishing. Species, rules, setting up commercial fishing permits, information requirements. But the board has not done any rulemaking on commercial fishing since that statute change. So it goes back a long time. But
So the
not as
selling
board
of
regulates.
fish itself has been occurring for a long time, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
Since 1961, that's when the statute.
1961, okay.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
He said the statute went into effect in 1961.
Oh, yeah, no, I got Eric's. It was the comment afterwards. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Is this the last year of the rainbow strain evaluation for two rainbow?
It's the last year of our main data collection for that, but then we need to look at the results and decide whether we're going to change brood lines. We've been establishing new brood line with the Eagle Lake strain of rainbows, so that if they prove to be better, both in the hatchery and for fishing, that we'll be in a position to change over, but it'll take us a little bit of time to make that transition. But we should be in a place to make that decision at the end of this year.
You said that the department or the panfish team was already considering or looking at the commercial fishing prior to the petition. Was there anything in particular that prompted that?
A variety of things. When we looked at commercial fishing, one of the things is, do we have good data that could show whether there are impacts from, and not just commercial fishing. To be clear, the panfish team is looking at panfish species and fishing activities more broadly. So there's the commercial fishing question. There's also questions about some of the changes in gear. The flashers that ice anglers use, the underwater cameras folks are using now, forward-looking sonar. There have been a lot of changes in technology. So the team has been looking at whether our current regulations need to be updated in any way related to those activities.
So if you're talking about presenting us with the proposed rule changes in January, if I understood you correctly, and that would kick off the rulemaking process. So 25, winter of 25 would still be as is. So we would be looking at changing the rules. If anything changes, it would be for starting January 1st, 2026.
That's correct. We like to bring proposals to the board in January,
Yep.
so that we can make it through the 3-vote process and get them into the guide to fishing, so that anglers have it for the coming year. So yeah, it would take effect January 1st of 2026.
And when is that guide printed again? Typically, it's September. Okay, so we have until September.
Yeah,
Of 25,
we're
okay.
working on the 2025 one right now, and
Yeah.
we're pretty far along with it. But yeah, the final proofs are usually August, September, when everything is set.
Are there any enforcement issues around commercial fishing?
There are some, and I've talked with the colonel and the wardens, would be happy to come to the board and talk about that as part of our presentation.
Any other questions for Eric? Okay,
I'll make a motion that we table this petition until such time as the rulemaking process of the fishing regulations opens up in January 2020.
I have a motion and a second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the recommendation of the department to table this until the rulemaking process begins in January. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, unfortunately, the door was locked and we had a member of the public who was not able to get in and and therefore was not able to take advantage of his 2 minutes of public comment. So Bob, if you'd like to, just time?
Stand here or?
Wherever you want, that's fine. You're on the camera if you're up front. If you're there, you're just a voice in the background.
Cool. All right. Well, my name's Bob Galvin. I live in Richmond. Wanted to start my public comment today by thanking the commissioner, thanking Lieutenant Bob Courier and the Warden Service. So last week there was a ban passed on the sale of internal organs and paws of black bears in Vermont. This was an issue that advocates and the department worked together on. And so, yeah, just wanted to say thank you to the commissioner. Thank you to the wardens for investigating these issues and for clamping down on one form of wildlife poaching and wildlife trafficking. I think that connects nicely with my thoughts on the commercial sale of panfish. I think that is in kind of direct violation of the North American model. I am supportive of the petition and look forward to the additional conversation surrounding both the North American model and the North American model as it pertains to panfish in Vermont. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have the department's recommendation on a petition presented to us 2 meetings ago regarding duck blinds and various hunting regulations. Commissioner?
So I'll ask the Director of Wildlife Division, John Austin, to speak to this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to ask David Sawsville to speak to the details of our recommendation to the board, but generally speaking, after David's wildlife management program gave the petition careful consideration, broadly, we're recommending no regulatory changes. Instead, we would suggest ramping up our efforts around outreach and education when it comes to production of duck blinds and staking locations for waterfowl hunting. And also, we do this already, but we'll make an added effort to make sure that through our outreach at certain times of the year, making it clear public lands are available to everybody. And we want to make sure that the hunting community is respecting that and providing equitable opportunities for everybody to participate. So, and then the petition also spoke to trying to consolidate some of the hunting zones for antlerless permits, as well as extending the gray squirrel and rough grouse hunting seasons. We're recommending not making those changes for a variety of important reasons. I'm going to turn it over to you, David, to provide some of the details around the recommendations, why we're suggesting no regulatory changes.
Thank you, John.
Just going off the easier ones with the duck blinds and stakes, we already have regulations that say when you can build a permanent duck blind. It's not really permanent, semi-permanent blind. And when you have to remove them, that's on public lands and waters only. Private land, obviously, you can leave it on your property as long as you want. We have, and that's on page 35 of our current hunting digest and guide. Also, it's placed within the waterfowl syllabus, along with a stake strike within the guidebooks and the syllabus. That the stake has no enforcement by law and has no precedence for you to be there, to place your blind there. It's a first come, first served basis. And we also have, should be coming out this month or early next month, we have a survey going on kind of preferences with seasons and other activities. We did put a question in there about use of blinds and people's preferences. We went on to a combination of WMUs and using one permit within multiple wildlife management units for Angeles Harvest, and that defeats the purpose of targeting that hunting activity to remove Angeles deer and to reduce those numbers within each WMU. So that we basically it kind of eliminates your management options. So that's one of the reasons we were against that. Also, the recommendation to extend the rough grouse and squirrel season. Numerous issues there. One, with squirrels alone, they're generally not active in January and February during the cold months. They tend to den up. They do come out occasionally on a warm day. Also, we have thoughts about, future climate change. If it does continue the way it's predicted within the models, we may be putting hunting pressure on squirrels during the breeding season, and we don't want to have that at this point. We don't have any process of evaluating them at this point. Grouse, same issue there is 2 months additional hunting pressure. We're also concerned about what potential might be happening with West Nile virus, especially in the lower tiers of the state because of where the mosquitoes are. Habitat issues also back in the 70s and 80s, the habitat was completely different, and now inventory of early successional habitat shows that in many areas you have 1 or 2% early successional habitat, which is a component for the grouse and should be up around 10%. So those are issues. And also we have a small game hunters survey that's going to be occurring within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So we'd like to see what other individuals would like to see in that. That's one individual. Then let's see, I think that was the final issue. One was also providing a pop-up where people basically have to check off and say, I understand that all land is open to the public and all state lands are open to the public. And what we've looked at that, it's the same idea. We will increase our outreach activities. I talked to our outreach staff, all the additional pop-ups that you fill out when you're buying a license, you tend to get burnout from people and they don't read those as often, and we don't have that. People just checking it off and actually reading it through. I think it's worth the work to change that at this point. So I think that's good. I've got those. Any questions on those?
2 questions. So, once again, I know the petitioner had included some pictures of stakes that hunters put out. So that does nothing. Correct. There's no legalness of putting a stake with your name saying this is
Correct.
on public land.
Correct. You're allowed to start building a blind the first Saturday of September. So if you were there at 12:01 a.m. and you start building, you're legal. Otherwise, no, it's nothing. You can't hold it there. You can build right on top of that stake if you want. And also the blind and the stake being there does not save that spot for somebody who wanted to come in and hunt right next to that blind. Generally, it's courtesy they don't, but if you wanted to, legally you could. So the laws.
And then second question for the small game survey, how do you target small game? So tag.
Well, I was trying to remember how Chris did that one. Our person on human dimensions, way the survey is set up, we're going to go out into the general hunting population. And there's a question, do you hunt small game or are you a big game hunter? They say no to small game. The company's going to move on to the next hunter and continue until we get the proper sample size.
Are those stakes that Mike mentioned in the petition, are they under the same rules that the blind itself is? Like, can they be put up at a time, and do they have to be removed at a certain date that blinds have to? Just the stakes.
They're not, like I said, there's no meaning. Usually you'll see them show up in July and August sometimes because people are trying to claim a spot. But as I said, there's no bearing on whether you get that spot or not.
I think the way to look at that, and I would defer to our general counsel, they're not addressed in the law. So there's no legal time to put up because they don't have any standing, so to speak.
So they can be left up after this. They can be left up year round.
Well, arguably, no. You are required to remove any related infrastructure.
Okay.
So I would consider that to be something, if it's a state that specifically is intended to mark rare or blind as, I would say that also needs to be removed by the date, whether it's the Lake Champlain date or the.
Have the warden seen a lot of problems in all of this?
And received that calls.
It sounded like the petitioner, his point was more that most of the hunters want to avoid conflict anyway. But what it's doing is just, it's preventing, for some hunters are taking the stance that if somebody's gonna stand there, I'm not gonna hunt there. And they're choosing not to hunt where probably they otherwise would if somebody was not putting up a stake or putting up a stand, is the way I understood him. It's really more that it's just limiting certain hunters from having access to, his thought was, anyway.
I think you mentioned the problem was mostly that these people would set up the blinds and then nobody would see them, no weeks on it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think a good fix is that if there aren't decoys out, then somebody's probably not there.
Well, it's worth being having waterfowl. There is sort of this culture within the waterfowl community where, in fact, one of the reasons that you have a requirement to have a sign, name, address, phone number, a blind or a stake, is so that you can contact that person. A lot of waterfowl hunters will do that. They'll get the information, they'll call that person, they'll say, hey, would you mind if I used your blind on such and such a date? So there's a lot of sort of reciprocity that goes on. Support one another.
But from a legal aspect, and I'll have boards and our attorney pipe in on this, you could technically go into that line, use it. Access public waters, and usually common courtesy among hunters is if the owner showed up that built it, they're gonna move out of the way and move on to another spot.
Are most of the blinds that we're talking about, are they basically on the water or are they on land?
Water.
Mostly in the water we're talking about. Okay.
Depends on how the lake goes up and down. I think it's more of a Lake Champlain issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, come up to the islands during duck season. I'll show you all about it.
Blinds have to have an identity tag on them, true?
Yeah,
Does that require contact information?
Name and address, I believe. There's not a requirement to have a phone number on there.
Okay, I was just wondering how people might get in touch with each other if, for use of a blind, if there's no information there, but I guess it's worked till now.
Experience, especially people have their phone numbers on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did not hear that comment.
Most people do put their phone numbers on there. It appears that they do most cases, and in the cases when I found one that hasn't, I use Google. Quite often find the person.
Thanks.
Sounds like it's the same rules as tree stands.
yes.
It's exactly the same rulemaking process.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I'd like to comment on the squirrels. I think that I have no problem. I'm in Bennington County and I know the west side of the county is loaded with gray squirrels. And there's no shortage of them at my bird feeders year round, or not year round, but in the winter time. I just think it would be a great opportunity for youth hunters to go out on a warm January afternoon and try to bag a couple of squirrels. I think I could get 4 squirrels in about less than an hour where I am. And I could repeat that number of times. There's a multitude down this way. That's it.
Any other comments or questions around this petition and the department's recommendation?
Could you restate the recommendation?
Well, I think it's a 4-part recommendation, 5-part recommendation. John, do you want to summarize it again for us real quickly? Sure that
So regarding the first element of the petition, which was to develop a rule to restrict the development of duck lines on public lands. The department is recommending that the board not proceed with the development of a regulation to restrict that activity, but instead the department will expand its outreach and education efforts to the waterfowl hunting community, making it clear what the legal entitlement is with duck line construction, and that the public lands are available to all the hunters. Anyway, no restriction, no regulation. We will expand our outreach and education efforts around that. That's number one. Two, this was placement of stakes to identify a location for somebody to hunt waterfowl. I don't believe the petitioner had that specific to public land. I think this was just staking broadly where you want to claim a spot to go duck hunting. That issue is already addressed in law. There is no legal entitlement to somebody putting a stake with their identification and their contact information. So there's really nothing to regulate there. It's more of a traditional activity. The fact that the stake is present does not restrict or prevent anyone from hunting that spot at any time. So again, we will address the sort of behavioral and equity aspect of that part of the petition through outreach and education. The third element of the petition was to include a pop-up on the department's website for when people procure a hunting license, that you would check the box that indicates that you understand that state public lands and waters are open to everybody, and that blinds claim no particular ownership of that location. Again, we don't think that that's necessary. We worry that it's an added element to the website that becomes white noise for the license buying community. And instead, we will again include that in our outreach and education efforts around the topic of hunter access to public lands and entitlement to various kinds of locations. Fourth element of the petition was speaking to combining wildlife management units for the use of antlerless deer hunting permits. We were recommending that we not make a regulatory change in that regard because it's very important for us to be able to manage antlerless harvest within a specific WMU, wildlife management unit. That's the whole point of having the wildlife management units. So again, we're recommending that no change be made there. And the last element of the petition was recommending that the board consider expanding the hunting season for ruffed grouse and gray squirrels into the month of February. Right now, they both end at the end of December. We're recommending against making that change for the reasons that David saw.
Okay, David, you get all that?
I did. Thank you.
Okay, great.
It's no down the line.
Yes.
Recommending to not deny the permit.
Correct. To just step up their outreach and education as
Correct.
as an alternative to changing rules or making any rules.
That would be.
You can just put it in there so it's in the record, which we're gonna do anyway, but
Yeah, it's in their written recommendation.
So do you want to address these individually or as a whole?
Well, does anybody have any issues with any of the 5 as presented by the department? If there are no issues, then we can vote on them as a group.
We vote on them as a group.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we deny this petition in its entirety for the reasons as given by the department.
And accept the department recommendation.
Yes.
Yep.
I'll second the motion.
And we have a second. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it
Opposed.
unanimously.
Oh, I think.
I have one opposed, excuse me. One opposed. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Next item on the agenda is the 2024 Angeles deer permits and youth season.
So we're looking for the final vote on you had the presentation.
Yep.
By Nick. Nick is here. So if folks have questions.
Yes, we need a formal motion, or we'll just take the final vote.
Both.
Well, I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, okay, just one moment, Dave. I had one comment that was starting before you said that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
So when I'm looking at Franklin County, 6,000 permits, which probably won't all be sold. So if a person gets a permit through the lottery, killed a doe, and there's available permits over the counter, can they purchase a second permit?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And how many can they purchase?
You can only shoot 4 deers.
Right, but if you haven't had any success or hadn't had any deer up until that point during the late muzzleloader season, if you will, you could have up to 4. You could. Okay.
You can buy as many as you want, but you can only fill 4 total.
Right. Yeah.
So if you want to make a donation,
Be happy to sell them.
yeah.
Do you have to fill a tag before you can purchase a second?
Yeah.
Just like archery. Right?
Archery. I got worried about filling the first one.
Yeah. And after this winter, you should be able to do that.
Well,
You got to get out of your truck.
yeah. Details.
Okay, any other questions, Mike?
Yeah, quick question if Nick's on. Any groundbreaking or new comments from the last 2 public hearings?
No, we really did not. In fact, I would argue probably most of the comments we got at the public hearings were either supportive or asking us to kill more deer. So nothing that would change our recommendation.
Just, the unofficial public hearing that I had up in Canaan, people were surprised that there were any being issued for E1 and 2. But not opposed.
So Nick, I have a question. If I'm a hunter that hasn't, and again, I'm talking about the late muzzleloader season, what's in my mind. If I still have 2 deer in order to fulfill my quantity of 4, why can't I buy 2 tags at one time for 2 different WMU for 2 different districts, and as opposed to waiting until I fill 1?
Because that is the current rule. I think the intent there, the rules are designed under the assumption that all of the permits would, of course, go in a lottery. Obviously, we're in a different situation now, often. So I think that's something we could maybe look at changing in the future. Basically, we're trying to avoid someone just buying up a bunch of permits to save deer. But there's no biological reason why we couldn't let someone hold a permit in one unit and also another permit in a different unit.
No, it was the petition from earlier that kind of prompted that question in my mind. He was talking about having that flexibility. and to go to hunt in multiple areas, multiple units. And being able to buy multiple tags as opposed to having one to float back and forth across multiple areas. You would still be able to maintain your quantity of deer taken within that management unit, if they're purchased. But anyway,
Yeah,
you've
no,
answered
I
it.
think and I know David wants to comment on
Yeah.
this.
I'm just saying, the original intent was to provide an opportunity amongst
Correct.
many people instead of just one individual.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, as Nick said, things have changed with the
Yeah.
number of permits and the budget.
No, it makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
We can look at it when we open that room.
And how difficult is it to change it? And I mean, in the future, if we have, the adverse effect, to change it back.
And one thing I can say is in 2025, we will be
Mhm.
kind of looking at all the regulations. So I think that could be considered.
So it can be revisited. Then.
Yes.
So it can be revisited then.
Any other questions for Nick or anybody on the recommendation? Okay, if not, do I have a motion to accept the recommendation as presented by Nick?
So move.
I'll make the motion.
So moved, then a second. Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, hearing none, all those in favor of accepting the recommendation from the department on the youth and novice season Angeles deer permits, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Nick. Okay, next item on the agenda is the commissioner's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Evening, everybody. Like spring's finally here. Although I say that, it'll probably snow. I'm going to start out, I'll just give you a quick update on the legislative session that just ended last week. The one that you were all most concerned about or following probably was S-258, and S-258 did not come out. It stayed in House Environment and Energy. So the board, at least for now, remains the way it is. As mentioned by a couple folks at the beginning of the meeting, one of the bills that we had proposed at the beginning of the session and Representative Brennan submitted to the committee, House Environment and Energy, it was broader than the bear, gallbladder, and paws. It included some language around amphibians. The bill didn't get moved. None of the four that we suggested got moved. And then at the end of the session, there was a recommendation to attach just the bear parts to the miscellaneous agricultural bill. And Bob was one of the persons who suggested that, approached me in the State House, and we said we certainly supported it since it was our bill to begin with. And I spoke with the governor's office and the Secretary of Agriculture since it was their bill. They're like, good, full steam ahead. This is something that we all support. Lieutenant Courier came in and testified with myself. It passed unanimously in the Senate Ag Committee. And as mentioned, was noted by one senator, it's good to see folks collaborating when it really comes to the defense of wildlife. So that was an important bill, or at least part of a bill. And so we're going to look at the ones that we proposed earlier this year and see if they're still valid. I suspect they will be next year. As far as the budget goes, there was a lot of back and forth, especially with the capital bill. They did cut some money out, then they put it back after some negotiations. I'm happy about that. So we'll be able to continue some of the work we've been doing at Dead Creek, as well as the camps. And also, there was funding for 1 year for Salisbury Fish Culture Station. But the legislation also requires the department to keep the hatchery open till the end of its current discharge permit, which is the December of 27. We were concerned about this because it's mandating it, but only funding it for 1 year. So we'll be in an interesting position come January, but we'll move forward. So at least the news is we'll have the fish hatchery for at least one more, well, for 3 more years. In the meantime, there was a requirement that we put together a study to look at a number of things, and we're going to read that broadly. One of them is in looking at what's it going to take to attain another discharge permit for Salisbury, but we're going to look at the whole fish hatchery system and options going forward, since we have that opportunity. So all in all, I think, oh, and we did get funding for an additional warden position. And that's frankly based on the work that the wardens have been doing since they picked up the duties of animal cruelty. So kudos to the wardens, and I think the administration and the legislature both recognize that they need additional personnel to keep doing their great work. And the kind of not really impacting the department right now, but they did pass, I think it was H626, which is the animal welfare bill. This was a much broader bill that was going to create a division of animal welfare in the Department of Public Safety. And that got stripped down significantly to creating a director of animal welfare. So this is to deal with animal cruelty, also puppy mills and importation of dogs. That position won't be hired. That bill doesn't have an implementation date until January of 25. So that's not in any way going to alleviate the work on the wardens with respect to animal cruelty. And unless they actually add personnel to that division over the next couple of years, it's going to continue to be a heavy lift for our folks. So that's kind of it, the summary of the legislature. I did want to give, I had a request just to give you some basic numbers with respect to the hound hunting of coyote season, which we remember we did rules on. If you don't remember that, it'd be... All right. So here's what I can tell you. We had 38 total permits issued, and I'm just going to give you them by county. Franklin County had 8, Addison 7, Caledonia 7, Orange 5, Orleans 5, Rutland 3, Wyndham 1, Chittenden 1, Lamoille 1. And the total coyotes harvested during that season were 52. There were 6 in Addison, 35 in Franklin, 7 in Orleans, and 4 in Rutland. I think it's significant to note that the legislation and the rule were both created primarily to reduce but to regulate this activity, which prior to that it wasn't, and to reduce to a good extent any hunter landowner conflict. And during that whole season, we had 0 incidents reported. So from just that metric, the rule was successful. So, and now that the legislatures, they do have a veto session coming up. I don't know that that will impact us much, if at all. We'll keep an eye on it. That's in June. And, so that's my report.
I have a couple of questions. On the bear gallbladders, were those, I mean, that's not something I was really in tune with, but were those gallbladders being sold from bears that were legally harvested, or were the bears being poached?
Yes.
Both. Okay.
You want to jump in there, Justin?
I would just add that we had no way of knowing, but and until the case has reached their conclusion, there's indication that some of them may even be coming from other states routed through Vermont because they can't be sold in other states. So we were potentially creating an outlet for other folks to get around their state laws. But there's presently a couple of, we have 2 investigations currently to that sort of stuff.
I would also add, Brad, that historically speaking, this goes back for decades, and this isn't the first time we've had cases like this.
Cases that what came in from other states?
Cases of people selling bear gallbladders.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think this was asked in a prior meeting, but what are the gallbladders used for primarily? The black market.
Most of it goes to Asia for medicinal purposes. They've extirpated or into near extinction many of the native species, and so they're looking for other to replace them.
There's no more gallbladder sales, right?
For Vermont, there's about 40, roughly, don't hold me on that, but about 40 states that prohibit the sale of them.
My second question was around, just out of curiosity, how are the wardens doing in terms of their fill rate with their positions? Are we able to fill all the warden role positions
All the ones were authorized.
that are authorized? Okay, good.
We have 3 coming out. I should have mentioned this earlier. We have 3 graduating in 2 weeks
Oh, yeah.
from the academy. And by all reports, they're doing extremely well. I've talked to a couple of the instructors. I know the colonel's gone down and had lunch with them. Looking forward to getting them on the job. They, and I'll let the warden speak to this if I misspeak, but they'll come out, have some additional firearms training, and then they do some intensive classroom work. And then they go around the state for about a year? And then they're on their own. So it's significant. The other thing I'll make note of is that the screening process seems to be very successful in terms of we have a very low attrition rate of people who once they're accepted, not making it through. And kudos to the wardens, command staff for the process that they use to select. But we have a luxury because for every opening, we have about 100 applicants. Is that about right? So that's tells you everything you need to know about our warden service. They are well respected for a very good reason.
I was asking because I knew that at one point the warden that covered my area where I live, they ended up covering like an area and a half typically. And I was just wondering if they're able to bring those back down into a more manageable, reasonable size area that they patrol.
So there's a couple of things. I mean, you have births, babies, all that sort of stuff takes wardens out of the field. Injuries, military service. We've had wardens on military deployment for 3 years.
Yeah.
So that stuff, the military deployments have defined as, but at any rate, there's a number of things that go into that. When we can fully hire all of our vacancies, we're reasonably close to being able to put a warden in the historic districts. We have a few that we can't. It gets it to about an average of 8 to 10 towns is about the average.
And for your particular area, Brad, yes, by February. And then cover that, will go from like 17 towns to about 8.
Yeah, excellent. Good. Any questions for the commissioner?
Yeah, I got it. So I take it the sale of spare parts is something that does not have to go through the Fish and Wildlife. Board. That's correct.
Oh, it's now statute.
It's, yeah.
They have primacy over that. If,
Legislative.
yeah,
Okay, yeah. What I figured.
that's correct.
Any other questions? Neil, David, any questions for the commissioner? No? Okay,
Thank you.
hearing none, I have a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Right.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
There's food, Abigail. I don't know if you wanna.
Got a beam.
Thank you.